Hi there, welcome back. Now, if you joined me for Sense and Sensibility, you know how much I enjoy walking through Jane Austen, her world, one character at a time, exploring not just what they do, but why they do it and how they grow along the way. So this time, we're stepping into Persuasion, often called Austen's most mature novel. Not just because Anne Elliot is older than Austen's other heroines, but because the story itself carries a quiet depth. Here, love isn't painted as, with bright colours of youth. It's shaded with experience, regret, patience, and the courage to take a second chance. Now, if Sense and Sensibility was about youthful contrasts and learning as you go, then Persuasion is about living with choices made long ago and discovering what that means to act differently when life offers another turn at the same crossroads. I should warn you, this series will include spoilers because I'll be talking about every major character, their role in the plot, and what they mean for Anne Elliot's journey. Now, if you haven't read Persuasion, I'll still encourage you to listen to my videos. Who knows, you might be persuaded to read it yourself. And for this series, I'll be using Austen's novel as my foundation. The novel is our truth. For visual reference, I'll draw mainly from the 95 adaptation, which I feel stays closest to the spirit and detail of the book. And I know there are other adaptations, and some of you may really enjoy them, but some adaptations take creative liberties. In one recent version, Anne even breaks the fourth wall to speak directly to the camera. And that's not something Jane Austen ever wrote. And while modern interpretations can be interesting, my aim here is to stay as close as possible to Austen's original voice and meaning. The story in brief. Let me give you a brief overview of the story then. Anne Elliot is 27, well past the prime of marriageable age in her society. She's intelligent, gentle, and quietly steadfast, but 8 years earlier, she was persuaded to break off an engagement to Frederick Wentworth, a young naval officer with no fortune. The persuasion came from Lady Russell, a close friend of her late mother, who thought Anne too young to risk an uncertain future. Anne obeyed and never quite recovered from the decision. So years later, the Elliot family's finances are in trouble. Sir Walter Elliot, Anne's vain and status-obsessed father, is forced to lease their estate, Kellynch Hall. The tenants, Admiral Crofts and his wife, who happens to be Wentworth's sister, which means one thing: Wentworth will be back. At first, their meetings are painfully polite and distant. Wentworth seems to enjoy the company of the lively Musgrove sisters, Louisa and Henrietta, while Anne suffers in silence. But during their group trip to Lyme Regis, an accident changes everything. Louisa falls from the cob, and Anne's calm competence shines through. Wentworth begins to see her in a new light. The news that Louisa becomes engaged to Captain Benwick stirs hope in Anne. But in Bath, a new complication arrives. William Elliot, the family's charming heir, who seems to be courting her. Lady Russell approves, but Anne suspects he's not what he appears. While Wentworth comes to Bath, he misreads Anne's situation, believing she might marry William Elliot. Then comes the moment that changes everything. After overhearing Anne speak passionately about the constancy of women's love, Wentworth writes the letter, that extraordinary declaration of half agony, half hope. At last they reconcile, free from the misunderstandings and the persuasion that once kept them apart. But Austen closes with a note of realism. As a naval wife, Anne will face uncertainty, yet for now, she has her second chance. My series structure for Persuasion. In this series, I'll be looking at every character who shapes Anne Elliot's story. The following will have their own videos. I'm not sure what order though, yet. Anne Elliot, Captain Frederick Wentworth, Lady Russell, Sir Walter Elliot, Elizabeth Elliot, Mary Musgrove, William Elliot. And then I'll group together some in one video because their arcs and roles are closely tied. So we'll have a video on the Musgroves and Captain Benwick, the Crofts, And then I'll have one grouped episode looking at the wider social web, those people who seem like their background figures, but who still affect the choices and relationships at the heart of the novel. And you've seen this in my other videos, 15 characters, 8 characters. So I'll be looking at Penelope Clay, Mrs. Smith, and the Dalrymples. So if you're new to Austen, welcome. If you've known her novels for years, I hope this series will let you see Persuasion with fresh eyes. It's often called Austen's most mature work, not just because of the age of the heroine, but because of the quiet realism. Here, romance isn't all moonlight and music. It's all about patience, endurance, and the long resilience of the heart. Some have suggested that Persuasion reflects Jane Austen's own growth as a writer, and perhaps her desire to explore love in its later, more reflective stages, rather than the first rush of youth. It's a story about waiting, about hope that seems foolish until it isn't, and about recognizing when the time has finally come to speak your heart. So let's begin. Bring your patience, bring your curiosity, and let's walk slowly through Persuasion, one quiet revelation at a time, because that's what I do. And if you haven't already, I'd love you to subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell, because that way you won't miss a single episode as we explore each character and the role they play in this remarkable novel, for some of whom it is their favourite Jane Austen novel. So the first one, I'm wondering, do you think I should do this in the same order that I always do, like the minor figures until I get to the main figure, Anne Elliot? Or should I kick off with Anne Elliot for a change and then traverse it backwards so that we can see how all the other players affect her life? I'm in two minds. Drop me a comment, let me know. Maybe the general consensus will persuade me which one to do first and which one to do last. Anyway, Persuasion is about to start. See you in the next video.